This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter and far more dangerous, because what failed here did not fail loudly. It failed procedurally, silently. In the order of operations, a conclusion appeared before a question, an ending arrived before the facts were allowed to exist. And once that happens, everything downstream changes. Investigations stop being searches. Institutions stop being independent. Truth stops being discovered and starts being managed. You are told this is resolved, that nothing more needs to be known, that the system worked. But when a system tells you to stop looking, that is the moment you should pay attention. Stay with me. Not because this is shocking, but because it is becoming normal. And once it is normal, it no longer needs permission. What comes next explains how that normalization works and why it doesn't stop where you think it does. The mistake is thinking this system is controlled by people. It isn't. It is controlled by sequencing. Who speaks first? Who closes first? Who gets to say done? Once the conclusion is declared at the top, every institution beneath it recalibrates. Not because they are ordered to lie, but because survival depends on alignment. When truth is centralized, independence becomes friction. And friction is treated as failure. Agencies stop asking what happened. They start asking what is allowed, what can be released, what must be avoided, what creates risk later. This is how power works in modern systems, not through force. Through preemption, by the time evidence appears, its role has already been decided. You are watching a structure that no longer investigates reality. It curates outcomes, and once that logic locks in, the question is no longer what happened. The question becomes who is allowed to know and who is protected from consequence. That's where this begins to accelerate, because this structure does not stay contained. The most dangerous change in a system is the one that feels familiar. Nothing here arrived overnight. No emergency vote, no announcement. What changed was the timeline. Before investigations opened, space. Space for doubt, space for contradiction, space for facts to collide. Now, the space is gone. What used to come last comes first. What used to be earned is declared. What used to be provisional is final. And because it happens quietly, it doesn't trigger alarms. People adapt. Institutions adjust their language. Process is compress. Everyone learns the new rhythm. Speak carefully. Document selectively. Ask fewer questions. Not because they are corrupt, but because the cost of being misaligned keeps rising. Slow shifts don't feel like danger. They feel like efficiency, like order, like control, until you realize the system no longer corrects itself. It only confirms itself. And when that becomes routine, the next incident doesn't feel like a test. It feels like paperwork. That's when the first real shock appears. And it never looks like the real problem. Then the system meets something it can't fully control. A moment where evidence exists outside the script, outside the sequence. Video, trajectory, a body that tells its own story. And suddenly, the problem isn't what happened. It's where the evidence lives. So the response is procedural, not dramatic. Control access. Narrow participation. Limit who gets to see what and when. This is not chaos. This is containment. Investigations shrink instead of expand. Witnesses are delayed. Questions are postponed. You are told this is standard, that it's temporary, that patience is required. But notice what's missing. Notice who is absent from the room. Notice which steps are quietly skipped. This is how a system handles risk. Not by confronting it, by isolating it. And the moment isolation begins, the outcome starts leaning in one direction. Stay with me, because the next move explains why some questions are never asked. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. Here's the part that rarely gets named. The system protects itself by learning where not to look. Because asking a question creates a record. A record creates exposure. Exposure creates a future. So the safest move is omission, not interviewing, not documenting, not fixing the moment in writing. Ignorance becomes a shield. If something is never said, it can't contradict anything later. This is how liability is managed. By keeping the file thin, by letting silence do the work. Those inside the system understand this instinctively. You don't need an order. You need a shared understanding of risk. Evidence that complicates the story is treated as radioactive, handled carefully, sometimes not handled at all. And the result looks clean from the outside. A case that appears orderly, contained, closed. But what you're actually seeing is a vacuum, a space where truth should have been. And once that vacuum exists, something else rushes in to fill it. That's when the system starts to move faster. This is where the pace changes, because once silence is locked in, everything else has to move quickly. Control the timeline, control the release, control the order. Some evidence is held, some is shared, some never appears at all. You're told this is normal. You're told this is procedure, but procedure has become strategy. What matters now isn't truth, it's sequence. Which detail comes first? Which one is delayed? Which one never gets asked? And while attention focuses on statements, something more important is happening elsewhere. Custody. Who holds what? Who controls which pieces? Because if you control the pieces, you don't need to control the story. The story assembles itself. And once that happens, there is only one thing left that can disrupt it. And that thing doesn't speak. This is the point where it reaches you, not as theory, not as structure, as exposure. Because when systems stop correcting themselves, they don't fail evenly. They fail downward toward the people with the least insulation, the least access, the least ability to force questions. You are told to trust the process, but the process has already decided what it can't afford to know. And if you think this only applies to rare cases, ask yourself who benefits from that belief. The rules don't change on paper. They change in practice. One omission becomes precedent. One closed file becomes permission. If this feels distant, that's the design. So stay here. Keep watching. Because the only thing more dangerous than a broken system is a broken system people stop noticing. What comes next shows why this no longer stays local. What starts this way does not remain contained. Because systems copy what works. When one structure learns it can close itself, others take notes. Jurisdictions watch each other. Agencies compare outcomes. Silence becomes a template. Not officially. Operationally, borders don't stop this logic. They transmit it. Once accountability becomes optional in one place, it becomes negotiable everywhere else. You begin to see the same moves repeat. Early conclusions, narrowed access, delayed records, each instance framed as unique, each one treated as isolated, but the pattern isn't local anymore. It's systemic. And the most destabilizing part is this. No one has to coordinate. The system self-replicates because it rewards alignment and punishes friction. At this stage, the danger isn't collapse, it's normalization, because once this becomes standard, reversal is no longer procedural, it's political. And that's where the future starts to split. From here, the system only has three ways forward. The first is adjustment, quiet tweaks, new language, just enough reform to preserve the structure without threatening it. Nothing breaks, nothing heals. The system survives by appearing responsive. The second is erosion, confidence drains. Files close faster. Trust thins out slowly. People stop expecting answers. They stop asking for them. The gap between power and consequence widens without noise. And then there is rupture, not a single moment. A sequence of miscalculations, a case that can't be sealed, evidence that doesn't cooperate, an institution that can't contain its own timeline. Rupture doesn't announce itself. It accumulates. And here's the critical point. The system doesn't choose which path it takes. Pressure does. Political pressure, temporal pressure, the pressure of what happens when control changes hands. That decision is still pending, which means the most important move hasn't happened yet. This is where I don't offer you relief, because nothing here has actually ended. What you've seen is not a malfunction. It's a system behaving as designed under pressure. When conclusions come first, when questions become liabilities, when silence is treated as safety, accountability turns optional. And optional accountability never stays optional for long. You are not being asked to panic. You are being asked to notice. Notice how quickly closure is declared. Notice how often independence is reframed as obstruction. Notice how power learns from its own success. Because the most dangerous moment is not the incident itself. It's the precedent it leaves behind. This doesn't resolve tonight. It carries forward into the next case, the next investigation, the next administration. And the question waiting on the other side isn't what happened. It's whether there will still be a system capable of answering that question honestly. Stay with this. Follow what happens next. Because once the sequence is set, reversing it is never procedural. It's a fight over reality itself. And that fight has already begun.